The dust hadn't settled on Walter
I was
Hendricks's
hoping I
boots
could
when
pay
he
you
walked
next
into the
week.
feed store that October morning, his
Things have
hat
been a
pulled
bit tight
low,
lately.
his hands cracked from work that never seemed to end. He was 52 years old, a widower for 2 years now, and the owner of 200 acres of ranch land that was slowly slipping through his fingers like water he couldn't hold on to. His wife, Grace, had been the one who kept the books, who talked to the bank, who remembered which fields needed rotating and when the cattle needed their shots. Since she passed, Walter had been running on instinct and grief in equal measure, and neither was paying the bills. He noticed the woman before he meant to. She was arguing quietly with the store clerk about credit, her voice low but firm, the kind of voice that didn't want to be heard begging, even though that's exactly what it was doing. Her name, he would learn later, was Sarah Kowalski, 38 years old, with 2 young sons waiting outside in a truck that had seen better decades. Before this story goes any further, and before you assume you know how this ends, I want you to sit with this moment, because what Walter did next wasn't charity and it wasn't romance in the way you might expect. It was something rarer, something that used to hold small towns together before the world got so busy it forgot how. If you've ever wondered whether real kindness still exists between strangers, keep watching, because this one will stay with you. Walter stepped forward before he could talk himself out of it. Ma'am, I couldn't help but overhear. I've got a proposition, and I understand if you think I'm out of my mind for offering it to someone I just met. Sarah turned, her jaw tight, clearly braced for pity or worse. I've got a ranch 3 miles out. 200 acres, more cattle than I can manage alone since my wife passed. I need help with the house, the books, the everyday running of things I never learned because I never had to. I can't pay much in cash, not yet, but I've got a guest house sitting empty, more food than one man can eat, and land enough for your boys to run wild on. Help me with the house, and your kids won't go hungry. That's the whole offer. Sarah stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. She had been 3 weeks from losing the small apartment she rented in town. Ever since her husband had walked out the previous spring, leaving her with 2 boys, 6 and 9. And a stack of debts she hadn't known existed until the collection calls started. She had been too proud to ask her family for help, too exhausted to ask anyone for anything, and now here was a stranger with sawdust on his sleeves offering her exactly what she needed before she'd said a word about needing it. "Why would you do that?" she asked, echoing a question that seems to live at the center of every story where a stranger's kindness defies explanation. "Because my wife would have," Walter said simply. "Grace used to say the ranch was too big for one purpose. She said land like that was meant to hold more than cattle. It was meant to hold people who needed holding. I've got the space and I've got the need. Seems foolish to let pride keep us both stuck." Sarah moved into the guest house with her sons Tommy and Eli before the first snow came. The arrangement was clumsy at first, the way anything new and vulnerable tends to be. Walter kept his distance, unsure how to share a home that had only ever belonged to him and Grace, and Sarah kept hers, wary of a kindness she still expected to have strings attached. But the boys didn't know to be cautious. Within a week, Tommy was following Walter out to the barn every morning before school, asking questions about the cattle, the tractors, the way weather could be read in the color of the sky. Eli, the younger one, took to sitting on the porch steps with an old dog named Duke that had been Grace's, scratching behind his ears like he'd known the animal his whole life. Sarah threw herself into the work with a determination that surprised even her. She had grown up on a small farm in Nebraska before her family lost it during hard years she rarely spoke about, and the knowledge she thought she'd buried came back to her hands like muscle memory. She reorganized Walter's chaotic ledgers, caught 2 invoices he'd been overcharged on for years, and negotiated a better rate with the feed supplier simply by asking questions no one had bothered asking before. By November, she had the ranch's finances in better shape than they'd been since Grace died, and Walter found himself standing in his own kitchen some evenings, watching her work at the table by lamplight, wondering how he had survived 2 years without someone who understood what it meant to fight for a piece of land like it was family. But winter that year turned cruel faster than anyone predicted. A blizzard rolled through in early December, dropping 3 feet of snow and temperatures that threatened the cattle huddled in the lower pasture. Walter, working alone in the storm to move the herd to shelter, slipped on a patch of ice and fell hard, shattering his ankle in a way that left him unable to walk, unable to work, unable to be the strength the ranch had always depended on. He lay in the snow for 20 minutes before Sarah, sensing something was wrong when he hadn't come back for the boys' dinner, went looking for him with a flashlight and found him nearly frozen, his face gray with pain and cold. She dragged him to the truck through snow up to her knees, got him to the hospital 40 minutes away on roads that shouldn't have been driven, and then, without anyone asking her to, went back out into the storm that same night to finish moving the cattle herself. Tommy and Eli helped where they could, small hands wrapped in oversized gloves, opening gates and calling to the frightened animals while their mother worked until 3 in the morning to save a herd that wasn't even hers to save. When Walter came home 6 weeks later, his ankle held together with pins and a cast that would keep him off his feet until spring, he found a ranch still standing, cattle still alive, and books still balanced. All because a woman he'd offered a guest house to had decided somewhere along the way that this wasn't just a job or an arrangement. It was hers to protect now, too. He sat in his wheelchair on the porch that first evening home, watching Tommy and Eli chase Duke across the snow-covered yard, and Sarah came out with 2 cups of coffee, handing him one before sitting beside him without a word. "You saved this place," Walter said quietly. "I offered you a roof, and somehow you're the reason I still have one." Sarah looked out at the land, white and endless under a sky just beginning to clear after weeks of storm. "Grace was right," she said. "Land like this isn't meant to hold just cattle. It's meant to hold people who need holding. I think I needed this place as much as it needed me." By the time spring arrived and the pastures turned green again, the ranch had 200 acres, a full herd, and something it hadn't had in 2 long years. The sound of children laughing across the fields, and 2 people who had stopped counting the days since loss and started counting the days since they'd found each other again. Not through romance rushed or forced, but through the slow, steady work of 2 families choosing to become one. If this story reminded you that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we almost overlook, do me a favor and share it with someone who could use that reminder today. Hit subscribe if these stories mean something to you, and tell me in the comments. Has a stranger's small act of kindness ever changed the entire direction of your life? I'd love to hear it, because stories like Walter and Sarah's remind us that we're never quite as alone as winter makes us feel.